Yurjimarang. The Wheeler Centre acknowledges the Wurundjeri and Woiwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered tonight and which we have the privilege of living and writing. We pay our deep respects to the people of the Kulin Nation for the constant care they have taken of these lands and waters. And we pay our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders, past and present, and I extend my respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people gathered here this evening. My name's Janine Lane, and I belong to the Wiradjuri people of the Murrumbidgee River, New Gundagai, and pay my respects to my ancestors. I currently have the privilege of living and working on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung peoples, and it's my great pleasure to be here tonight to launch Best of Australian Poems 2022. And I stand here tonight in solidarity with all dispossessed peoples on invaded lands around the world. On behalf of Best Australian Poems 2022, the Wheeler Centre would like to thank the Copyright Agency Cultural Fund and its head, Nicola Evans, for contributing the funding for this event, along with Creative Victoria and the Australia Council for the Arts, whose funding has also directly supported the creation of this book. And we are also deeply grateful to the many Australian and overseas bookstores and booksellers that have supported this volume in reaching an extraordinary number of readers. Tonight we have the privilege of hearing from the following poets: Ladul Yankul poet, Mayor Hodge; Panda Wong, Mayor and Panda will be reading in person; Peter Boyle will be joining us via video link; Reid; Samah Sabawi; Scott Patrick Mitchell will be joining us via video link; Bonnie Cassidy; Munanjali poet Ellen van Neerven; and finally, Sister Sai Xander. We will also be hearing from co-editor Judith Beveridge. In introducing this volume of Best Australian Poems, what I would like to most acknowledge is all poets, whether they're in this volume or not. The power of poetry to communicate what national discourse and national history fails to do cannot and should never be underestimated. And the page, however blank, white, and benign it may seem, is never a neutral space. Under the pen of the poet, each work reflects a slice of national consciousness, and in this way, poetry is a collective barometer of national consciousness at any one time. And we are conscious as we write that despite the significant pressure over many decades, Australia is the only settler colony that still has no treaty with the nation's first people, and there is, as yet, no voice to Parliament for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We denounce both national and international injustices and atrocities that have occurred as we edit, such as the shocking and senseless killing of another Aboriginal teenager in Western Australia, Cassius Turvey, and the killing of Masha Amini, the young Iranian woman beaten in prison, resulting in her death by religious morality police of Iran's government for not wearing a hijab in accordance to the government's standards. We also think of the Ukraine and Palestine. All poetry is storytelling. It's an exchange between reader and writer, a meeting place that you're being invited to here tonight. And it's an invitation into another's experience, history, standpoint, insight, and commentary. And collectively, the poetry in this book tells a very important part of Australia's story, much of which you won't find in national history or discourse. We will now hear from our co-editor, Judith Beveridge.
Hello, my name is Judith Beveridge. I'm speaking from Wallamedigal country, and I acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. For this launch, I'll be reading excerpts from the introduction that Janine and I wrote. It was a great privilege to be an editor of this anthology, and I'd like to thank Janine and everyone at Australian Poetry for all the work behind putting this together. And given that this anthology contains only 100 poems out of the many thousands we read, it's obvious that many excellent pieces missed out on inclusion. Different editors make different choices, and many excellent volumes could have been compiled from the available poems. When collating a national anthology, many factors come into play, especially in trying to represent the different states and territories, as well as gender, identity, and ethnic diversity. The variety and vitality of the poems preserved in this anthology are representative of the rich, imaginative approaches Australian poets are currently employing. Our aim was to be inclusive and respectful of differing and divergent poetics. And while poets may not always agree on what makes a poem memorable or exceptional, this anthology demonstrates that our poetry is as strong and powerful as any other art form in the country. In this volume, you will find narrative poems, prose poems, lyric poems, ekphrastic poems, archival poems, documentary poems, found poems, poems sourced from performance, spoken word or slam poetry, protest poems, poems that expose the duplicity of the Australian dream, poems that critique national narratives and selective histories, echo poems, translations and poems in other languages, including First Nations languages, concrete poems, conceptual poems, long poems, short poems, elegies, epistolary poems, surrealist poems, and more. There are poems which critique and challenge the current socio-economic status quo, poems that critique and challenge racism, colonialism, structural privilege, and systematic inequalities, poems that call for social justice, poems that grapple with climate change, global warming, and infinite consumption on a finite planet. There are poems that contend with religion, spirituality, philosophy, mythology, and myth-making. Others are expressions of body, gender, non-binary experience, and states of being. Some poems focus on introspection, such as memory, locale, emotions, fragments, and episodes. Others focus outwardly on the geopolitical, on globalism and international movements. Poems within this collection challenge, expand, and redefine the limits of what poetry is and can be, and give new shape and form to Australia's evolving literary landscape. Through form, content, style, and visual impact, these poems challenge the limits and confines of an existing literary canon to bring new voices, new themes, considerations, and concerns to the fore. In reading for and curating this volume, we considered poetry's capacity to crystallise, disrupt, refuse, expose, challenge, inform, or conform to the spectacle of Australian life. We also believe there can be a power in bringing together, in a co-editing model, the editor's differing viewpoints. Poetry is not just about subject matter or content. It is also about a wide raft of craft and aesthetic values. Not everyone agrees what these values are, It is a contentious issue as to who decides what makes a good poem, and one always needs to question received values and the cultural and political context in which art is made. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Maya Hodge. I'm a proud Ladle and Yangka woman. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Bunwurrung and Wurundjeri country. I would like to acknowledge the people of this land. I've been nourished here and guided, and I endeavour to look after this land as it has done for me. I'd like to acknowledge as well I was raised in Latchi Latchi country and give my thanks to the mob there and my family. My mum Sonia and my brother Indy here tonight. Without you, I wouldn't be writing today. This is my poem called Kwangdongs. I peel and peel kwangdongs in my mother's garden. The ice in my water melts slowly onto the hot surface of our scuffed wooden table. I watch as the light gently slides across the shed wall, telling me the time is slowly moving on by. As I peel the kwangdongs, black gunk sticks to my fingernails and scatters across my lap. I want to dry my kwangdongs in the sizzling Mildura afternoon heat, to let the skin glisten like blood-red tree sap. I want the fruit to curl in the exquisite sun. I want the skins to cook so I can breathe it deep into my lungs. We reach up high to pick and pick the kwangdongs. I remember when I was a little girl, hiding amongst the salt bush, watching my mother and aunties pick and pick kwangdongs. In the sweltering sun, they gathered the fruit in time with the honey eater's song. I sit and softly wash the fruit, trying to get the infestation out, trying to stop the invasion of bugs that chew until the fruit is rotten to the core. My bare back hot from the stern eye of the sun and my tired feet flat against the concrete floor. Peeling back time as I sit with my mother, picking and picking kwangdongs along the long winding river of this country's spine, keeping a loving eye on the seasons and the scar tree filled with native bees. We walk mother and daughter along the banks of the river and the dense curtain of river reeds. I pull the seeds from the kwangdongs and pile them in bowls on our kitchen table. Sometimes I still find them hidden in the shadows of my pockets. They overflow in our home and rest in the coolamon sitting beneath our living room mantel. I want to boil the fruit in brown sugar and let it slowly turn into soft sunset silken syrup. The colour of the rolling sand dunes and the country that nourished me, as I sit and peel kwangdongs in my mother's garden. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for having me. The poem in the book is called Signs from the Dead. Just want to acknowledge that this poem is part of an EP, which is a project that was conceived, imagined and recorded on unceded Wurundjeri land. Poetry is about paying attention, listening and observing, which are all practices that are deeply embedded in these lands, and I just want to acknowledge that. Let me find my poem. Signs from the Dead. I've always wondered about the leftover energy, the way water goes rushing down a hill long after the rains have stopped. Adrian Rich, For the Dead. Signs from the dead were clogging up the world's arteries. All sorts of weird theatrical shit was happening all the time. Clouds twisting into semiotic shapes and dog excrement arranged in profound and mysterious patterns. I was finding double yolks in every cracked egg and receiving mysterious hoax emails about God, heaven, and cryptocurrency. And AI telemarketing calls asking me, have you recently been in a car crash? My psoriasis was flaring up in sexy and esoteric epidermal crop circles. What were the dead trying to tell me? There was a very real possibility that I was coding things with a cinematic glaze, like ancient viruses sleeping in the Antarctic's thick ice. I was not ready to feel after feeling so much. Have you ever seen a salmon cannon? They're devices that catapult salmon across dams. A commenter on Reddit wonders if salmon think that they're portals to another world. 2017 was the year of realizing things. 2017 was the year I was propelled into another world. I was writing poems about grief. I was trying to milk my pain dry. I believed that writing was a way of closing in, getting intimate with the details. I failed to remember that moving closer to something can mean moving further away from something else. I wrote about grief so much that I sucked the marrow out of its meaning. Semantic satiation tasted like a used bandage, so familiar that it started to disgust me. I fracked my feeling core until the meaty center of my heart closed over. Things became so absurd with sadness, all logic leaped away, like this video I watched of a mum absolutely losing it as a baby lisps its very first word, Anthropocene. Like this time, Anne from work gave me a handmade card after my dad died. She had painstakingly cut out and pasted an image of a vaguely Asian girl to the front. I was confused by the racial inaccuracy and touched by the meticulous penmanship, and completely unprepared for the revelation that Anne was actually a devout Mormon, and this was a devout Mormon card, and that she had written her devout Mormon email inside so I could begin my devout Mormon journey. All I can say is that some people see pain as a franchising opportunity. I'm thinking about that one Joan Didion quote that people always send you. A single person is missing for you and the whole world is empty. When someone you love has died and when you'd rather be left the fuck alone. The way the word missing hisses out into the air from behind clenched teeth, and how the missing will stretch on and on into the rest of my life like a blaring Hummer limo with lights ablaze. I used to think of grief as something to be purged, but now I feel differently. I feel it multiplying in my cells, metabolizing in my small intestine, flaking off my scalp, pooling in the corners of my eyes, a new haggard body part to add to my ongoing collection of haggard body parts. Last night I watched a film where the sad protagonist asks a staunch driver to take him somewhere she likes. They end up at a garbage plant watching clumps of trash fall from the sky with a strange grace. Turning to him, she says, "Doesn't it look like snow?" Thank you.
Last May I visited Madrid, and while there I went to the Thyssen-Bornemisza Gallery. I was especially struck by one painting by the German expressionist Franz Marc. I wrote this poem partly while standing in front of the painting and partly in the following days. After Franz Marc, The Dreamer, 1912. They are always arriving, the blue horses, so close they could almost nuzzle the back of your left ear. Just when you thought to have done with the world, they are here shimmering from the green meadows as you sit there cross-legged but the thighs opened wide, as if to give birth to the dream of yourself. For so long you'd anticipated something from the receding hills and the tall, thin houses of childhood. And how many times they must have come unnoticed, when your eyes were glazed over, swallowed by elsewheres. And now the roar of the world has stepped away. Dreamer who speaks with your body, today you have awoken inside yourself. May the blue horses guide you forever.
G'day. This is very strange. 2 years ago I used to work here. And now I'm here. I'd also like to acknowledge the land on which this poem was written, and that I, work and live on. The land of the Kulin Nations. It's always a pleasure to be on this land and tell stories and write poems, and it's a privilege that I don't take lightly. This is also a poem about work. It's called Book of Hours. This is the poem from my dream, I say. Office hours are a myth. Publishing poems is money for nothing. The supermarket is both under and over policed. Today the first thing I said was, "Shut up, cat." Possible upsides to a pandemic include the death of musicals. Possible downsides include the personal essay. Publishing poems is printing money, but the money is bad. I've found this year that I'm a betting man. You could chase me down the street, but where would I go? I'd like to write a poem in the style of Scott IV, but how can you? Maybe only via legacy. Don't trust the morning to do the evening's work. I am absolved by my position at the desk. That desk over there. I am freed by my duty of care. Publishing poems is money in the bank. Reading poems is time off the clock. My afternoon is my employer's. My fingers are my own. Who dictates the role economy? 2 kids equals time off in lieu. Turn poetry into stocks. By sitting here, I am winning. I am luckier than most. There are no doubt those who would kill for this mousepad, but does the reverse apply? 2-factor authentication is a misnomer. There are 3 factors, and the third is yourself, your desire to log in. Possible upsides to working from home include increased productivity. Possible downsides include lockable doors. Work in its purest form is art. Labour in essence is love. I am forgiven by my reputation as an entrepreneurial spirit. Of what, I'm still unsure. Today outside is ferocious. Ulcers are mysterious, with none of mystery's romance. No one gets the shop anymore. A personal printer's back or out. The only conscionable thing is to have nothing to show for a week's work and a blank CV. In what way are we trending? Could we get a report on that? I am still a young man. I am making a difference. Up the garden path is still a viable pathway. Being here negates the possibility of being there. Publishing poems looks good on a resume. Can we push our 2 to 4, a 4 to tomorrow? Ergonomics can be a spiritual practice if you let it. Plants are an acceptable worry. There is nothing more interesting than weather. To buy a scanner is to understand Marx's theory of the commodity. To send a fax is to understand purity. Possible upsides to a volatile market include a sense of adventure. Possible downsides include losing everything. By taking up this space, I am useful. My presence is internally monetized. What appears to be a choice is often no choice at all. For example, ink. By writing this poem, I am taking back, but the poem is only anti-capital when secret. This is good for employers. A clean desk is a happy desk. I am driven by my tendency to help. A problem shared is the terrain of the consultant. A problem halved is one of countless outcomes. Would it be more tedious to stop or continue? Do you archive or remember? How to measure ethics on a matrix? The modern office is post-cubicle. Friday is losing its cultural relevance. If you are never really on, you can never really be off. I am on track to meet my goals. This provides some comfort. The colour of a lanyard can tell you everything. This office block is over 100 years old. But what of the soil beneath that? Or beneath that again? A good worker has a clear trajectory. Often this requires obstacles to be cleared. I am embarking on a new chapter. I am realigning my values. Heracles' theory of the break room. HR's theory of culture. Publishing poems is an act of inflation. A sunny day has economic implications. A clear commute is a glimpse at divinity. Morale is a budgetable cost. Possible upsides to a restructure include increased efficiency. Possible downsides include clearing your desk. This is the poem from my dream, I say. A good worker is like a tree, inherently removable. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Samah Sabawi. I am a Palestinian writer. I come from colonized stolen land, and I live and write on the colonized stolen land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of this land and pay my respects to Indigenous elders, past, present, and emerging. My presence today is overshadowed by this week's events, culminating in Palestinian homes being set on fire, as a whole town was torched by settlers in what Israeli rights groups themselves have described as a pogrom. My presence here is also overshadowed by the discourse surrounding calls to cancel Palestinian speakers at the Adelaide Writers' Week. I am aware of the long history of struggle for Palestinian writers to be heard, not cancelled, and seen, not made invisible. So thank you, Australian Poetry and Wheeler Centre, for including me in this event. My poems tell stories, and our stories are often stranger than fiction. According to UN figures, between 2000 and 2006, there were 69 cases of Palestinian pregnant women forced to give birth at Israeli checkpoints. Since then, there has been no further statistics. So we don't know what case number 70 has actually really experienced. This poem is case number 70. This is not how I imagined it would be. Legs parted on the blood-soaked dirt, strangers rolling up my skirt, hands pulling down my undies, UN observers counting indignities. They write me down, they write me down, they write me down, a number. I'm case number 70. I inhale the wisdom of 1,000 matriarchs and the patience of 1,000,000 refugees. I exhale fear and tyranny. I am not a stray animal abandoned by the roadside. That ambulance is here for me. I booked a hospital room. I decorated a nursery. I even prepared a music playlist to reduce my anxiety, but all of this is out of reach. All of this is out of reach. I'm case number 70. Guns loaded, phones shooting. Can I have some privacy? I inhale the scent of lemon, the fragrance of jasmine, the warmth of your skin, the tenderness of your flesh finally slipping out of me and into a spectacle of inhumanity. I exhale tears and anger. This is not how I imagined it would be. I breathe you in, and I breathe everything out until you and I are all there is, and all there is is you and me. Thank you.
Honour to the Whadjuk Noongar Nation on whose land I live and write. I pay my respects to elders past and present and to any First Nation people in the audience this evening. Sovereignty was never ceded, and this is, was, and always will be Aboriginal land. Hi, my name's Scott Patrick Mitchell, and I'm really honoured to have a poem included in Best of Australian Poems 2022. My deepest gratitude to the editors and Australian Poetry. The poem I'm reading this evening comes from my collection Clean, which this collection discusses my lived experience of addiction and recovery. The poem is a beau present, where basically a keyword is used and you create words from that to write the poem. The key word that I've used for this poem is methamphetamine. So as such, content warning for references to drug use and drug taking. Prayer for the parents of every addict. Meet, emanate, that heat, him, imp, aim, pin, inmate, hit it, animate, anthem. Pant, aphanate, eat 10 het men, attain mania, methane, main, heap, teeth, anti-mint, theme, thin. Team, tinea, tin. Name, paean, paint, pan, patient, patina, pain, maim, methamphetamine, emit, hate. Meme at heathen me. I am them. Mime, manatee, mine, meanie, a meth matinee. The pie high eaten meat pie, pie man, hip man, ape man, it man, an anime heap, anti-neat, inept, nap, hath, tine, tip. Pa, ma, mama, tempt, tea time, nip, amphetamine, neep, tame, pent, pen, tie thine time tighten, then theta, tap, I. Amen.
Thank you, Judith and Janine and AP for this anthology. This poem was written where I live up on Dja Dja Wurrung land in central Victoria. That's where it was composed, on the land of a very active and strong living community of Jarrah people. But it was conceived of and prompted by a place called Heidi, which some of you probably know, on the Birrarung and Wurundjeri land. It's called Mandala. The house is small, only a cottage, and sits picking at its dread. I don't want to write about this house. I must let it out of the poem, like smoke carrying down the misty river, around the bend of leaning trunks away. I want to write about Erica McGilchrist. We share a birthday ruled in the tarot by the star, water into water, water into earth, water into air. At first I found it hideous, Erica's early 1950s expressionism, her angular, anguished women. They were just clowns without Joy Hester's humour. Others went to war to find these extinguished eyes. Erica went to Kew. By 1955, the number of female patients at Kew Mental Hospital was 464, roughly equal to that of male, although Erica said they were perhaps thousands. Unlike Albert Tucker, she didn't go to gawp at primitive states. She taught troubled people to paint. The anxious patients preferred to simply colour the linear designs that Erica drew and drew. And so I changed my mind about her women behind fences or in mirrors. They aren't insane. They feel sad because their babies died, or they lost a midnight argument with themselves, nose to nose. You can go mad by being told you are. After her hospital classes, Erica drew pastels of women driving wheelchairs and toy cars. It was a couple of days before the anniversary of Erica's death that I first saw this work in the Reid's cottage at Heidi. Under the men, on its mantles, her flags are brighter stars. Within months of Q, the pictures by the art therapist were updated by dry fucking cleanable paintings. Dry cleanable paintings? Done on the floor using acrylics on linen, they look like kitsch tea towels. A heraldry of X-ray animals and hatching, nicked straight from desert artists and Mountford's Arnhem Land collection. Helmeted, cassocked figures and crowds of masks. She said the purpose of a wall hanging is less serious than a painting. It should be decorative, a backdrop to the life that goes on around it. But maybe Erica purged something, the modernist, because later she regretted these backdrops for Melbourne sitting rooms. Ambiguous objects, geometric dropping into patterns like Tetris, intricate esches of hound's teeth chain-linked, riddles of scaffolding and chevron drains, to the half-closed eye, a cyborg garden, a teratoma. Sometimes she arrived after history, often she arrived before it. Sydney Nolan was reducing emblems while Erica watched them form, pigment in a jar of water, crystals joined seamlessly. These recur and act like loopholes letting her through into the next phase, but they hang together, they don't splinter apart. Symmetry, what repeats? Enigma, what resists? Emblem, what gains meaning? Working in Munich in the early 60s freed her line from shape and woke up what she deeply knew, that human cruelty lives next door, fills the standard veins of a subway map. And returning home, she was to realise what she said was a profound sense of the vulnerability of old and new Australians. She mightn't have approved of the tarot with its archetypes. She sought pattern for infinite variety. She got into knots but avoided ties. Lucy Lipper diagnosed female imagery in Erica's work, dripping with it, the American said. This was a puzzle that Erica could not solve. Was a sexed bank of imagery reductive or another escape from the cultural patterns she was coming to loathe? She said the recipe in 1972 was an Australian landscape with maybe an Aboriginal figure or two as decoration only, woe betide any artist who introduced social comment of any kind, the whole to be painted in Drysdale colours, reds, oranges and brown, or alternatively, the colour scheme could be based on turquoise blue. Under her star, Erica was making mandalas, thick with pale glazes. They refuse representation and they bleed for loss. Forms of grief and re-enchantment, a cosmic design. Art sickens, art heals. The day after first seeing Erica's work, I hear that Kate Jennings has died. The first time I read Mother, I'm Rooted, I was an undergraduate and found a copy at Alan Wern's suggestion. The second time I was a postgraduate understanding how a second wave feminist poetics could surround so much work but not include all of it. Now I felt the impossibility of shoulder to shoulder. Erica had found another way. Inspired by American feminist organising, in 1975 she co-founded the Women's Art Register, calling out for female artists nationally to submit slides of their own work, and it grows. A female identifying non-binary or trans artist can join the register still with a membership payment, and they are held in a living archive of practice. I find Erica's work again later, this time breathing in a white cube between neon strips and slogans, the hard edges that her soft craft knows. Installed by contemporary female collaborators alongside their own, as though it were yesterday and she'd slipped out of the gallery for a kebab. And this is when she flowers into embroidery, movable but not decoration this time. In the 80s, she's threading some knowledge into the fern heart and the necklace uterus, and it's an optical code. What it knows, can't be said in another way. I pull the curtain aside and there's another behind, a tapestry of mist filling the spaces between stringy trunk and new leaf. A chunk of blue basalt sits on the deck like a sleeping animal, like the chough's nest, a clay trough balanced on a bough. Its pits are sharp in my foreground against the bush, which floats up like a waterfall. Thanks.
I'm Ellen van Neerven, and my poem is called A Poem for Protection. What comes first, the poem or the poet? Which remains longer on country? Poem, please protect me from greed. Danger occurs when I crave the singular. Hiding in the crackle of the present, crave the sandalwood behind the neck. In the quiet corners of the room, behind the ears of hugs. Quiet. The earth moves so greatly when I want to run. Remain originated by soul, move, scoot, nothing. While we still have hours, souls to the big block of wind. I am a living line. I am a living line. I stay in the light. In the light. I stay in the light. In the light.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I was born and raised in Southeast Zimbabwe. My family rather is from Southeast Zimbabwe, so I identify as Karanga and an Achira. I live and work on Bunurong, and this poem was written on Orangery, Wairarong. It's a short one, but it's packed full of so much history and so much symbolism. And I was trying to think of a great way to give you a way to access it from my perspective. It was written as a reggae dancehall song, so I'm gonna sing, and you can dance. Reggae has had a huge influence on Zimbabwe. It came to us directly from Jamaica. It was part of our liberation rebel music in the 70s. And people like Bob Marley worked with our musicians to write a song that had the name of a country that was yet to be. So this poem is about imagination. This poem is about how colonization steals the imagination of people. And this poem is about how liberation is reclaiming your right to imagine yourself on your own terms. Gentleness, it's my superpower, and I work it generous, but like a lioness. Overstep or disrespect, and soon you will learn. Yes, I'm a lioness, I regally balance supple softness with agile fierceness, this wholeness, yes, it's rarely welcome, but your fear of my strength, that's none of my business. Oh, Gentleness, gentleness, the lion. So often we think of the lion as like a symbol of domination, but that's colonization in our imagination. If we go back to the ancient symbolism, we see lions in all African mythology. The Sphinx, Aset, Nebtehet, Aset, the original Mother Mary, the nurturers. We see it in Black Panther, Basht, originally a lion, the cats. Gentleness, the nurturers. Gentleness, the ones who take care of community. But if provoked with agile fierceness, they will respond to protect what needs to be protected. So gentleness, my superpower, and I work it generous, just like a lioness. Overstep or disrespect, and soon you will learn. Yes, I'm a lioness. I regally balance supple softness with agile fierceness, this wholeness. Yes, it's rarely welcome, but your fear of my strength, that's none of my business. The lion. You have to have the heart of a lion. That's something we hear all the time in reggae music. Folks standing on the front line have the heart of a lion. The lion. Thank you.
Okay, that was almighty. So can we thank our poets again, please? I'd like to conclude by thanking all poets, sponsors, and the Wheeler Centre for hosting this event, and to you, the audience, for supporting us here this evening. And I will end where I began, in re-emphasising the power and importance of poetry to tell the stories that national discourse fails to do. And that during these times, when some voices are still being privileged over others, poetry is our vehicle and our medium through which marginalised and silenced voices can speak. I'd like to remind you all that books are for sale at the conclusion of this event, which is right about now, and many of the poets will be available to sign books afterwards, and I'd encourage you to mix with these beautiful poets that we have here this evening. Mandanguru,